All right, music fans, welcome back. It is I, Dave, the real music observer, observing real music in real time for real people just like you right there. And me right here. The Atlanta Rhythm Section, one of my favorite bands. Yes, today I'm just kind of talking about music I like. I threw Poco out there again. As you can tell, I'm into a lot of, like, believe it or not, I like a lot of 70s music. Some of it definitely found its way into the 80s. But as far as all that 80s slick sound like Simple Minds or Tears for Fears, that's not my bread and butter. That's not my meat and potatoes. Although those songs come on the radio and the volume knob tends to just go up. But groups like Atlanta Rhythm Section and Poco, and yeah, I like the Eagles. I'll regrettably say I do because they put out some great music, and you can't, and the Doobie Brothers and that kind of stuff. If you want to call it West Coast, there's a theme there, quality rock theme, country rock, southern rock. It's all in there, and I like it all. But the Atlanta Rhythm Section had this singer. His name, Ronnie Hammond. Now, Ronnie passed away in 2010. I believe he had a heart attack, and he left the band probably 8 or 9 years prior to that. He had a habit of leaving the band. He left the band after, I believe, the Quinella album in '81, which, by the way, contains one of the coolest songs in the world. You need to look up a tune called Homesick by the Atlanta Rhythm Section. Nobody plays it. It's not played anywhere. If you're going to hear ARS on the radio, it's probably going to be just So Into You. That's it. Real adventurous station might throw on Imaginary Lover. Or maybe I'm Not Going to Let It Bother Me Tonight, but that's it. I mean, that's really pushing the programming gamut. That's really just going out on a limb and thinking that your listeners are going to be able to handle that, but some of them just can't. Some of them just going to hit the dial because they're not hearing, Rockin' Me Babe by Steve Miller every 5 minutes. So I tell you what, American radio right now is in free fall. And I'm talking about the terrestrial stuff. Yes, you can go find an internet station that you're going to love, and maybe you can get that in your car. But that whole collective sort of communal way we used to listen to music together as sort of this musical listening family, that's done. That's over with. So everybody's kind of fending for themselves. Ronnie Hammond had this amazing voice, which was both tough and emotive and dark, and sometimes just, he could go from fun to dark. The tunes that he typically had to sing had a ton of emotion written right into them. And I was fortunate enough back in the day when I once was scouring through a dollar store record bin, or in this case it was a CD bin, and just CDs for $1. I'm there, man. And I'm digging through, and Atlanta Rhythm Section was kind of, I had been in radio for years and I hadn't really thought about them. And then I'm digging through this bin and I pull out 2 CDs by the Atlanta Rhythm Section and this guy Walter Trout, who I had never heard of before, but he was on the cover and he had a guitar and his band looked really cool. So I was like, okay. So for $3, I had 3 CDs. One of the CDs was called Eufaula by the Atlanta Rhythm Section, and learned later that was their last studio record. Platinum Entertainment, which was the company that put it out there, they went belly up. And then there was another CD called like Partly Plugged, I think it was. The Atlanta Rhythm Section had their famous dog from their Dog Days album, I think, on the cover. And holy crap, Batman, I had some really cool music, not to mention I had the Walter Trout, which I went and listened to as well. But this new sort of reconstituted version of the band was amazing. The unplugged stuff, the old songs, sung acoustic, and a couple of new tracks thrown in there, which fit very well on the album. Those things were just smoking, and the whole thing, I think it was just 10 songs, but They were just 10 great songs. And this thing, Eufaula, really reminded me of the tunes they used to do from Quinella back. They had an album they did called Truth in a Structured Form in the late 80s. Really changed their style. They really tried to be the 80s version of ARS, and the songs are pretty good. I just think people weren't ready for it. People wanted that Southern rock meets Steely Dan approach, which it worked for them. And, if you go back to like a rock and roll alternative, some of their other albums, you're going to just hear a band that was very precise in the studio. And that's why they had this huge song, So Into You. That's why they had I'm Not Gonna Let It Bother Me Tonight, Imaginary Lover. These were all songs that had a lot of power, a lot of emotion, a lot of swagger. I talk a lot about vocal gravitas. This guy Hammond, he had it, man. He just had it. So it's a little pathetic. The band is still around, and they've actually reverted back to their very first vocalist. His name is Rodney Justo. He quit after the first album came out, probably because the album just didn't do anything, and he was around for a while, but he just eventually vanished, and he's come back in to sing lead vocals. The problem with old Rodney is he sounds nothing like Ronnie Hammond, and the band hasn't been able to really find somebody who sounds like Ronnie. And here's my advice. In this case, you can't do it. You can't do it. He's that distinctive. This guy is more distinctive as a vocalist than... I can name 50. I know we talk a lot about Journey on this channel and Steve Perry, but there are guys who sing tenor who kind of sound a little like that. You know what I mean? Same thing with Peter Cetera. Chicago had a couple of guys. This guy, Ronnie Hammond, he had his own deal. Go listen to his music and tell me who sounds like him, because maybe vocally speaking he's kind of baritone-ish, but he had this gravitas and this swagger that you're not gonna hear it anywhere else. And I would have folded up shop. I wouldn't have kept going. But obviously, if it's free margaritas, it's 4:00 and this band is showing up and they're calling themselves ARS and they're going to play some music, you're going to sit there and listen to it, and after the third or fourth drink you're going to be like, yeah, ARS, woo! And honestly, I've heard them and they don't sound like ARS all that much. Now, the guitar player who's in the current band, his name is Steve Stone. He's nuts. He is nutty. I don't know. He is probably the greatest unknown guitar player. Of course, I'm throwing all these superlatives out there. But there's one solo he does on So Into You. It's like a 12-minute version of the song. And he had to replace a guy by the name of Bailey, who Bailey himself was amazing when he was in the band. But Steve Stone just kills it. And I think he worked on Eufaula, and he worked on some stuff prior to that during the mid-90s. I think he was part of the revamped band. But these guys have gone through so many lineup changes. The bones of their existence, by the way, go all the way back to a band called the Classics 4 from the 60s. My sister had all of their 45s, like Traces, and I remember her playing that song over and over again. It's just... Oh, and the original version of Spooky, by the way, is done by Classics 4, and Atlanta Rhythm Section has their version, which has become the more popular Halloween favorite these days. All right, so that's my reminiscing. Atlanta Rhythm Section, amazing band, Ronnie Hammond, unreplaceable. Is that a word? Non-replaceable? Either way, the guy can't be replaced. He was just one of a kind, crazy good, and should this band be in the Hall of Fame? Not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. Skinnerd, right? They're in, so maybe a band like the Atlanta Rhythm Section gets considered. They sure had some great music and some great albums. All right, that's it. I'm done. I'll be back soon. I'll be talking more probably about the stuff I want to talk about, so stay tuned.